Yesterday, I went to a movie theater to see a movie targeted for children by myself. It felt weird. I'm probably not going to do that again. But it did provide me with one of the most interesting movie experiences of the year so far. If, not to be confused with It, My Red Balloons Were Totally Out of Place, is a perfect example of a movie that has all the puzzle pieces of a good movie. They've just been assembled incorrectly. And not like one or two pieces are out of place. I mean, like the corner pieces are in the center. And yet, as I watched the movie struggle to decide which direction to take its plot, constantly waffle on its theme, and eventually choose the wrong one, and provide little to no world building, I also felt some real emotions, or whatever people who have hearts made out of material other than stone call the things in Inside Out. So let's give a brief breakdown. I suppose there will be some minor spoilers in this review. Elizabeth, or B as she's known, no idea why, something her mom called her, I guess, goes to live with her grandmother for a short while after her mom dies of cancer and her dad is in the hospital awaiting heart surgery. Her dad, who seems to be a good, present, single father, so love that for a change, loves humor and tries constantly to make his daughter laugh. He greets her when she comes to the hospital with a little bit where he does a dance with his IV pole, and another where he ties sheets together leading out the window as if he's made a break for it and has written a goodbye note left on his pillow, all while hiding in the closet. The emotional distress of possibly losing her dad not too long after her mom dies triggers Bee to see imaginary friends, or ifs. She also meets Ryan Reynolds, who is trying to find matches for ifs that have been displaced since the kids who imagined them got older and outgrew them. Eventually, she decides to help Ryan Reynolds find children for these ifs, and then that goal switches to trying to reunite ifs with their old kids who forgot them. Let's start with the good. Kaylee Fleming is a fantastic actress. I never could get into The Walking Dead, because, I value my time too much. So the only things I've ever seen her in are as young Ray and young Sylvie in those flashbacks. So here's proof that first impressions can be overruled. I assumed in this movie that Ryan Reynolds would be carrying it, but no, it's Kaylee. Her performance is top notch, assuredly aided by John Krasinski's directing, and Reynolds doesn't seem to mind taking it down a bit and letting her steal the show. She balances the innocence of a young girl with the forced maturity of a kid whose family loss has made her feel like she has to grow up too fast. If nothing else good comes out of this movie, it should be that people recognize Kaylee Fleming for the up and coming star that she is. There are some great moments that depict the innocence of childhood. I especially couldn't keep myself from smiling when Bee becomes friends with a boy in the hospital where her dad is in a matter of minutes, because that's one of the superpowers lots of kids have. They can make friends effortlessly with almost anyone. And the If retirement home that Bee transforms according to her imagination is a truly joyful scene. The CGI is great, some of the best I've seen in a while, and a good reminder that almost always the cases when CGI looks the best is when it's used to add elements into an already good, real shot and not create entire settings from a computer screen. Krasinski in his directing gave Fleming plenty of help with how she was to act with an invisible character interacting with her. And finally, it's got heart. That feels like kind of a cop out way to compliment a movie, but with so many films feeling like soulless cash grabs, this is one that John Krasinski was clearly really excited to make. There's something to be said for watching a movie that the cast clearly had fun making. Krasinski and Reynolds, both of whom have young daughters and no doubt experience the wonder of their own kids' imaginations, seem to have a personal stake in this movie. Now for the bad. The tonal shifts in this movie are too far on either end of the spectrum. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a fun movie about the magic of imagination or a compellingly emotional movie about the tragedy of growing up too fast. It can have both, but one needs to be the dominant tone while the other works in during certain scenes to underpin the main one. This movie could be really magical, and at times it is, and it's great to step into a kid's imagination, but it's bogged down by the really heavy weight of Bee facing down potentially becoming an orphan. I think it would benefit greatly from having the only source of heavy sadness coming from the ifs whose kids have forgotten about them. The plot is pretty thin, and it takes a while for the story to get its wheels and decide what it's actually going to be about. Then, when it does decide what the mission for its characters is going to be, it reverses course on it and decides to go a different direction. At times, it feels like John Krasinski had this idea for a movie about kids' imaginary friends and said, great, and got the cameras rolling before his story had all come together. It's a little unclear what the theme of this movie is supposed to be. There's dialogue exchanges about the importance of telling a story, and it seems like the film wants that to be the thing undergirding the runtime, but it's basically ignored for the middle hour and 20 minutes of it. It flirts with themes of memories or nostalgia, but only for the service of brief scenes that depict fun CGI. The world building can join Kirk Cousins' team's defenses during the postseason in the non existent category. It makes no sense how the ifs interact with the world. Like, the people who can't see them, but also they can notice the effects of them on their surroundings. Except when they can't. Why can B see the ifs if she's grown up enough to not be able to remember her own? Actually, come to think of it, why do people lose the ability to see their ifs when they grow up? You'd think it's because they lost their sense of imagination, but that's unclear. In fact, the film implies a completely different reason for how people can see their ifs. That brings me to this final section. There are a couple things that the movie is so close to getting right. It's like watching a quarterback put on an incredible display of evading a sack, but then opts to just throw the ball away when he has a receiver open for a first down. As I was watching this movie in the theater, I was envisioning my thesis for this video. By about halfway through it, I actually thought it was going to be that If is a child's story that adults need to hear. A story about the wonder of a kid's imagination, and just because you grow up doesn't mean you have to clamp down your creativity and dreams of the fantastical. And for the entire back half of the movie, I just kept waiting for it to land the plane on that. But at the last minute, it veered off course and instead decided to suggest that kids' imaginary friends are born out of and seen because of troubling events that leave them lonely, and maybe even that adults should retreat to their imaginary friends when they're faced with adversity, which is a terrible message for children and adults alike. One more way it almost gets it right. There's a scene where Bee's grandmother, played by the talented Fiona Shaw, puts on a record and starts to dance, briefly rediscovering her childhood dream of being a dancer, and that puts her on a track to rediscovering her if. But the film then kind of brushes that to the side until the very end. I think the film should have focused solely on reuniting the grandmother with her if and the Steve Carell voiced if with his grown-up kid. The If retirement community is cool, and it's fun hearing Matt Damon, Bradley Cooper, Blake Lively, and Emily Blunt, among other stars, voice a who's who of silly imaginary friends, but it broadens out the story so that the trees conceal the forest. But despite all these criticisms, the movie has much to enjoy. Hearing the recently passed Louis Gossett Jr.'s reassuring voice in a wise imaginary teddy bear friend will warm your heart. The film has the emotion to be a good family film if you have kids, and Kaylee Fleming's performance should put you on notice for whenever she's headlining a project. I just reviewed The Fall Guy last weekend, and there wasn't a good movie to be pulled out of that film, but there is one here, and it's a shame it didn't see the light of day.
All right, the sauce.
What?
The sauce. I don't know. You're using too much sauce. Okay? Review's over.